Riffle, riffle, strip, riffle, cut is a sequence here that is used by a lot of casino-type personalities when doing gambling demonstrations or in legitimate games. The only reason I'm looking at this is because I was watching Penn and Teller's Fool Us, the new season that just started this past week, and they featured Richard Turner on there. And if you don't know who Richard Turner is, you should. Richard Turner is one of the greatest demonstrators of cheating techniques with cards that probably there ever was. He's one of the very, very finest. He's put out a lot of DVDs and videos, old VHS videos from decades ago, where he explains everything that he's doing. And really, Richard Turner doesn't do anything terribly new. He has a few nuanced ideas of his own, but much of what he does is very, very old, classic cheating and things that were taught a long, long time ago by by the likes of John Scarney, people like that. If you saw the episode, he did fool Penn and Teller. I think that being said, and understanding what it is that he does, I don't think Penn and Teller were really fooled by what he was doing. I think that they were fooled because they probably got hung up on one little piece of what he was doing in there that really threw them off. I'm not going to talk at any great length about that, but it had to do with the manner in which he was acquiring his hand that he was eventually going to be dealing as the winning hand. That being said, just watching that got me thinking about, these table shuffles and this kind of stuff, things that we don't really talk about a great deal on this particular channel. We deal in easy methods, simple things to learn, things that can be learned with a little bit of practice and maintained with even less. And that being said, it seems like we really shouldn't be talking anything about this kind of thing because most of these techniques are very, very tricky and difficult. The sequence that I'm going to be showing you is going to hinge on a different method that Turner does not use, or did not use, at least in that example, intends not to use, called a Zarrow shuffle. And there's a lot of tutorials out there on the Zarrow shuffle. The Zarrow shuffle is a blind shuffle, meaning that it keeps the deck in complete order. You do not have to do the Zarrow shuffle in any particular way. There's a lot of variations on it. There are the initial methods that were taught by Herb Zarrow, the creator of the shuffle, and those methods tend to be a little bit more advanced, require a little bit more control and the maintaining of breaks and whatnot. And then there are very simple variations on that, which Herb Zarrow has taught for many, many years, and those tend to be the ones that a lot of magicians and performers use. And then there's even very, very rudimentary versions of it that require a great deal of cover that really anybody can do with a little bit of practice. I kind of pick the middle ground. I like to do a version of the Zarrow that is a little bit more easy but can be relatively open. And I picked up on one particular nuanced idea from Damien Neiman, the creator of the Fast Company DVD series. And it's a very good DVD series that shows very basic cheating techniques. I recommend that you get it. And he doesn't really teach anything new on there, except I did learn one specific thing that I'm going to share with you here. Not really tipping off his work in any way. It's just the way he presents the cards and shuffles on certain shuffles to give cover. I'm going to share that with you. So let's take a look at how to do this shuffle using a modified Zarrow shuffle. So again, this is a blind shuffle, meaning that it's going to retain the full deck order. But before we do that, let's take a moment to examine what the shuffle looks like from a mixed deck, a real shuffle, so we can compare. I did post this on my YouTube channel, but we'll do it again just so you can see. This is essentially what we're trying to mimic. There's going to be a riffle, another riffle, a strip cuts, another riffle, and I'll kind of demonstrate the way I'm going to do it in my shuffles here, and then a cut. So that is the real thing, and that's a real shuffle sequence that is fairly thorough because it mixes the order of the deck not only in riffling, but also it mixes it with respect to packets. There's a lot of packet movement in there in the strip out, and then of course there's a cut right at the very end that really secures the shuffle. So that's what it looks like, the real sequence. There's a couple things I did with it there in my genuine presentation to try to mimic what the false one is going to look like. We'll look at that in a moment here. But before we even get into that, let me just talk briefly about the type of cards that we're using and why this might be useful or beneficial in this kind of presentation. So very briefly here, we're using a B deck, which has a borderless back to it. This is a slightly different stock, I believe, than the bicycle decks. It is printed, I think, at least I believe it used to be printed on a slightly different paper. It may not be anymore. I don't know how they're printing the new decks since they moved the company to Kentucky. But they do feel a little bit different. It feels as if there may be a little bit more plastic in the embossing, which makes the card a little bit more durable. They are not thicker. They're not more springy or anything like that. They just are a little bit more durable, just a little bit more sturdy, even though the deck is the exact same thickness. Might give the sense of a little bit more weight, perhaps, to the cards with this different card stock. Otherwise, it is a casino grade type of card. The casino quality club special. The number on them is a 92, just like the bicycle decks. I believe the number on those is the 808. This is a 92. Not that those numbers mean a whole lot, but you will find that there are different types of numbers for different printings and stocks out there. Again, borderless is good because it allows us to hide a lot of what we're doing. When there's no border on the deck, you can't see the discrepancies. If I just spread these out, you can see the edges of the cards disappear very easily, very quickly, which is very useful for things like dealing seconds. If you were to deal the second card, even if you were to do it very, very slowly, you can see that dealing the second card, you don't see the discrepancy of the border around the card. So that's one thing. Certainly for perhaps dealing bottoms, if you were dealing bottoms off of the deck, that also hides that discrepancy just a little bit. If you're dealing tops and then you deal a bottom card, you wouldn't see, with the cards facing the right way, the card coming from the bottom because there's no outline that's sitting over the card as you draw it off. So you can deal your tops and then deal your bottoms pretty covertly without anybody seeing them. So that's one reason why it is very beneficial to use a borderless deck like the B decks. And there's no shame in that. Even Richard Turner is smart enough to use a borderless deck in all of the work that he does. That is the advantage that you would take. You take every advantage when you're cheating. This is one that you would take when you're doing gambling demonstrations, is to get rid of that border. You can make bordered decks work doing these sleights, but it is a little bit easier to get caught when you're using those kinds of cards and when you're going borderless. So we're going to use a borderless deck here. The B decks are comparable in price to bicycle decks. They might be a little bit more in some localities. I find that where I live in the Northeast in New York State, and then up through New England where I visit a lot, that they are comparable in price at a pharmacy. Usually $3, usually under $4 for a deck of cards. Unlike with the bicycle decks, you don't tend to find B playing cards in combination packages of multiple colors, reds and blues. Usually find them single decks at a time, and that's where they can be a little bit more expensive. Whereas with bicycles, you can find the the economy packs of black backed cards too, and then two sets of red backed cards for like $11, which gives you a pretty good discount on each individual deck. The one thing about B decks is that they're cut a little bit more consistently. Their B decks are usually cut from the face to the back. Sometimes the bicycle decks are cut from the back to the front. That really only matters if you're going to be dealing with faro shuffling, which on this channel we don't deal a lot with. So it's negligible, the difference is. But anyway, there are differences. So B decks for this, because of the borderless deck, that's probably what you would want to be using. And this is the shuffle sequence as I demonstrated it to you very briefly. We are again using a Zarrow shuffle. We are not using a push-through shuffle. I may cover the push-through shuffle a little bit in a later video, maybe even very soon. But we're not going to do a push-through because a push-through is considerably more complex. Now, if you're doing a gambling demonstration that is very high profile, like what Richard Turner does, you would probably use a push-through shuffle. You probably would not use a Zarrow shuffle because a Zarrow shuffle is considerably easier to detect than a push-through type shuffle. So that being said, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to kind of find some middle ground here. Now, a Zarrow shuffle, very quickly, if I were to show you kind of from the side point of view what that looks like, a Zarrow shuffle, in fact, let me use, this deck is in order. Let me use one that's not in order so we can put it out of order a little bit. A Zarrow shuffle looks like this. Normally you would slip off the top card, or a group of cards if you're doing it more like what Herb Zarrow created it as. You would withhold a few cards. You would then take off the top block under those cards. You would maintain the break above those cards. You would drop a block over here on the left side, and then you would shuffle relatively fairly, probably pretty blockily. Then you would drop a big block on top before dropping off the packet. You can see how complex this can get if you're doing it the authentic way. You would then push forward a little bit on those top packets so that you give yourself a little bit of cover. You would deinterlace the right-hand packet, and then you would just push the right-hand packet in underneath the top packet right where it came from and square up, and that would be a legitimate kind of authentic Zarrow shuffle. So from the front it would look like this. You would maintain a break underneath a few cards. You would strip out the top stock, drop a packet, shuffle, interlace authentically, drop a packet on the right, drop your retained packet on the left, push forward on the top packets, deinterlace, and then bring them together. Okay, so that would be a authentic Zarrow shuffle, would not change the order of the deck. Now, the way that most people do it is that they will retain one card on the top. It makes it a little bit easier rather than retaining a packet. They will strip out the top packet and they'll just follow the same procedures. But by retaining one card, it makes it a little bit easier to control. You can do this in sequence of two without having to retain one card, and that's what we're going to be doing, and it looks like this. You take off the top packet, you do the shuffle, you retain one card on the left, which is actually from the middle of the deck. You push together and you complete the shuffle, but this time we're going to hold a break. You can see that we've held a break there underneath that top packet. We've displaced one card from the middle of the deck on top, but this sets me up to do another shuffle. But this time I'm going to take the bottom section of cards, and then I'm going to repeat, retaining one card here. And when we complete the Zarrow this time, what we're doing is we're actually putting everything back in order, except now we have the bottom of the deck on top and the top of the deck on the bottom. Now, you could normally complete this with just a simple cut. Okay, but instead what we're going to do is we're going to take the bottom section out, and we're going to do a false strip. The false strip looks like this. First of all, a real strip looks like this, where we're taking packets from the top. A false strip will look like this. We're going to take our packets from the bottom, just a few at a time. Now, it's okay if things hang up. You're going to be moving briskly enough that those things don't get noticed. But one quick idea here is that as you're taking packets off the bottom, take the group on the top, the main group, and kind of bring it down a little bit at the end and give it a circular motion. This will give the implication that the packets are coming from the top rather than from the bottom. So now we've put the deck back in order. Okay, so let me review up to that point. First thing was we took off the top. We do our Zarrow shuffle, retaining one card. We bring the deck together. We take off the bottom. We do it again. We push them together. We retain our break in the back. We take the bottom section. We do false strips from the bottom of that packet with a little bit of circular motion, and then we complete it. Then we end with one more Zarrow shuffle. Now this is going to be really, really, really bold. This is my addition to this. Instead of taking the top packet and going on like we did before, we're actually going to take out the bottom. So we take the bottom to the right, and then we're going to do a Zarrow like before, but we're not going to retain a top card. Instead, we're just going to end with a small packet on the right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to complete the Zarrow as we did before, but instead of having a top cover card, we're just going to go without it. I'll push these cards in, I'll de-interlace, and then I'll complete the cut, or rather complete the shuffle by just completing the cut and pushing in the top packet. I want to hold a break between the two packets because I have transposed the bottom for the top, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete by just giving it a cut at the break, and that will put everything back in order. So that is the basic shuffle sequence. This is the, I guess what you'd call the secret sauce that makes it work well. This is something, again, I got again from Damian Neiman in his DVD series. And this isn't really tipping off any major work. It's just a little nuanced thing that he does with cards when he's shuffling. Looks like this. If I'm doing a legitimate shuffle, I would take the top off, shuffle the top into the bottom, and then when I bring them together, I bring the right-hand side, which was the original top portion, forward as I'm squaring, like this. And then once I get it square, I square it from front to back. That's it. Just that little thing. Again, this is like the secret sauce in providing cover. So those were legitimate shuffles. This is what a Zarrow looks like, at least the first part of it in our sequence. If we do that exact same thing, we'll follow it up with a second one here. And then if I were to just complete this, I would cut it. You know, that kept everything in order. You can see what this does. Whenever you bring the cards together from de-interlacing, instead of seeing this clearly cut cards, this grouping of top cards and bottom cards with one cover card, by bringing the cards forward, set it up again here, by bringing the cards forward, I give all kinds of cover. I don't even see that bottom portion anymore. Okay, so I bring them forward, all the way forward. I can even insert my thumb in there. It's not really noticed in the back to maintain control over these. And then whenever I square them forward, or from front to back, it then aligns everything up together. And suddenly the bottom packet will just appear there. It really does look pretty authentic on the move. Now, if you know what you're looking for with any of these things, you would notice that you're just cutting the cards. But this provides a lot more cover than some of the other methods of covering for a Zarrow shuffle. And I think that's just genius. So once I saw that, I decided I'll probably never shuffle any different ever again. I'll probably always do it that way because it's just so clever. So again, just bring the cards forward and then square them from the front to the back whenever you square them up. Okay, let's take a look at how all of this fits together now. We have a deck that's in new deck order, and we will just follow the same procedures here and see how this works. I'll slow it down so you can, and I'll talk through each step here just to remind you. So the first step is to take off the top, riffle a Zarrow, retaining the top card on the left, push forward on the top cards, and then we're going to follow the Damian Neiman cover. We bring forward the top section, and you want to do a little bit of acting here and make it look like there's some effort in scoring the cards up. Instantly, we would not remove our hand here. We just keep it in location or square it to the side. Take the bottom off, over to the right, do another Zarrow shuffle, bring them forward to give some cover, square up. Take the bottom section, again, we've held breaks both times. Take the bottom section out, false strip cuts. And then we finish off with one more Zarrow, but we're going to take the bottom section out. We'll do the regular Zarrow shuffle, but we're not going to retain a top card. Push forward on the cards on the right, lifted the interlace, and then we're just going to complete the cut. And then we cut the top off at the break that we held, and then we're there. So everything has stayed in the same order. Now you may be very concerned about that last piece there, where we take the bottom section. Look, don't worry about it. If your hands are close to the ends of the deck and you're providing some cover, this will be completely accepted. And let me explain why here. The reason why it's accepted is because what we're doing is we're taking the bottom, and subconsciously the viewer can see this. When we take the bottom out from the deck and then we interlace and we drop the last card being from the bottom section, this looks like we're burying the top into the bottom. And that looks very, very genuine, just in casual viewing. Now, we do need to complete the cut to put it back on the bottom, but that's one of the reasons why you can get away with this. A second little nuanced idea when doing that last one is to take the bottom out, interlace as normal, push forward, do your cover in the front, but bring the front of the deck, on the front of the top part down a little bit and way out there like this, and it just makes it appear as though these are truly, authentically interlaced with the back ones as you draw it all together. Again, you have to hold a break on that. The breaks are very important to remember in this sequence, and that's probably the one thing that you'll have to practice the most in order to make this all work together. So up to speed, our shuffle would look like this. You don't have to go fast. You don't have to be super smooth. You want to take your time and make sure everything squares up just like you would if you were really shuffling. Probably the most important part of this is the acting that you do when you're squaring things up. It ought to look like you're giving it some effort to put things together, especially on that last one. The very, very last riffle. This one is just, this is totally bogus. So you want to try to make this look like, you're really trying to get things squared up and put together. Because all you're doing is you're taking the bottom off and putting it on the top. That's all we're doing, okay? So, just work on your acting. That's probably the most important thing to work on. It's probably a good piece of advice for any kind of magical effect, is that it's all acting. It's all a bunch of make-believe, and you need to work on making the false thing look like what the real thing looks like. Okay, so there it is. In a coming video, we may take some time to look at the push through or the strip out false shuffle, and just talk about a few things that can make that maybe a little bit easier and more accessible to the common magician. That's a pretty hard move, but we might be able to clean it up just a little bit, make it a little bit more simple. So there you go. Shuffle sequence, riffle, riffle, strip, riffle, cut, using a modified Zarrow and a little bit of cover.